The first rays of dawn sliced through the lingering mist over the vast Masai Mara, spilling rivers of crimson and gold across the savanna. The rising sun seemed to set the sky ablaze, as if the heavens themselves were foreshadowing the storm, a fate about to crash upon Marcus's quiet life. He stepped out of his weathered wooden hut, steam curling from the chipped mug of cold coffee in his hand. Each breath turned to mist in the brisk dawn air, ghostly wisps that danced and faded, like fleeting moments of peace. For 10 years, Marcus had called this wilderness home, each sunrise a reminder of nature's untamed beauty and quiet brutality. But even a decade of tracking lions, hearing the night calls of hyenas, and studying the elegant death of cheetahs could not have prepared him for the sight that emerged from the trembling savanna grass that morning, a golden shape moving, with the heaviness of heartbreak, black rosettes shimmering like shadows under the growing light. It was an African leopard, the queen of silent killers. But she was not the ghostly predator of Marcus's research notes. She limped forward, burdened, her powerful shoulders hunched around a tiny, bloodied form swinging from her jaws. His instincts screamed to flee. Every primal thread of his being told him this was death walking. Yet something deeper kept him rooted, a desperate, wordless cry in the mother leopard's brilliant amber eyes. 10 meters, 5'3", he could now see the limp cub she carried, her shoulder torn open, a small paw twisted at an impossible angle. The cub was barely breathing, each shallow rise of her chest a fragile miracle. Then, with a reverence that shattered the line between predator and man, the mother leopard placed her child on Marcus's porch, her gaze never wavering, a silent command shining through her tears of amber. Save her. The world held its breath. Marcus could feel his heart pounding, a drumbeat of fear and awe. His mind screamed to lock the door, call for armed rangers, do anything but kneel before a wounded cub under the watch of a lethal mother. But something ancient and human took hold, compassion, a force older than any weapon. Slowly, hands trembling, Marcus approached the tiny, shivering creature, his flannel shirt outstretched like a white flag of hope. As he wrapped her gently, the mother let out a low hiss, vibrating with primal warning. Yet she did not lunge. She stepped back, settling just meters away, never blinking, a sentinel between her child's last hope and the dying of the light. Marcus lifted the cub to his chest, her blood staining his shirt with the scent of raw, unforgiving wilderness. At that moment, man and beast stood in the fragile space between life and death, and something unspoken bound their souls. Blessed are those who answer the cries of the voiceless, for they carry the weight of heaven in their hands. Inside the dim, silent hut, time slowed to the rhythm of a single heartbeat, the fragile, stuttering breath of a dying cub. The air was heavy with the scent of blood and earth, each mote of dust spinning in the golden shafts of dawn piercing the cracks in the wooden walls. Marcus cleared his worn table, placing the cub upon it like a sacred offering. The deep wound on her tiny shoulder glistened red and black, fresh and clotted blood forming grotesque patterns over her golden fur. His hands trembled as he retrieved the battered first aid kit, its contents rattling like bones. Each second passed with the weight of eternity as he fumbled for gauze and antiseptic. His satellite phone crackled with cold beeps that seemed to echo in the oppressive stillness. 1 ring, 2, 5. Every unanswered tone another nail driven into the coffin of hope. Finally, a gruff voice answered, "James here." Marcus's words spilled out in a torrent of panic, a dying cub, a mother leopard watching, the unbearable urgency. James's voice was steady, crisp, each instruction slicing through the fog of terror. Clean the wound, stop the bleeding. Keep her warm, keep her breathing. But James's final words chilled Marcus to the marrow. She won't make it without professional help. I'm calling Sarah. Keep her alive until she arrives. 60 minutes, the longest hour of his life. Outside, the mother leopard remained a statue carved of gold and shadow, eyes glowing with unbreakable resolve. Through the window, Marcus caught her gaze again and again. Each time, it felt like a prayer passing between them. He warmed a mix of honey and water, dripping it into the cub's mouth with an eyedropper. Each feeble flick of her tiny tongue was a triumph of will against the dark abyss. The words of the wild echoed in Marcus's mind. When you fight for the smallest life, you fight for the soul of the world. His heartbeat rose and fell. With every shallow breath of the cub, a fragile rhythm binding man and beast to the pulse of survival. The thunder of an approaching engine shattered the hushed tension. Dust exploded in the dying light of afternoon as Sarah's Land Rover skidded to a stop outside the hut. Marcus watched through the window as the seasoned wildlife vet emerged. Her eyes wide at the sight of the leopard sprawled calmly on his porch. No cage, no dart gun, just raw trust and desperate hope. Sarah moved with the unhurried precision of a woman who had danced with death many times before. Step by deliberate step, she closed the distance between herself and the apex predator. Her eyes never left the mother's, her hand resting lightly on the tranquilizer gun slung over her shoulder, but she did not draw it. "I've heard of things like this," Sarah whispered hoarsely as she stepped inside, her gaze shifting from the mother leopard to the cub bleeding on Marcus's table. "But I never believed I'd see it." Without another word, she snapped open her medical bag, syringes and bandages gleaming like weapons of mercy. Her hands moved with ruthless efficiency, a needle sliding into the cub's tiny vein, antibiotic flowing, gauze pressing, needle and thread stitching ragged flesh. Marcus knelt beside her, his own breath catching with each whimper of the fragile creature. The room filled with the smell of antiseptic, the sound of frantic heartbeats, the low rasp of Sarah's voice explaining every step. Broad-spectrum antibiotic, fluid replacement, adrenaline if her heart slows. Marcus's eyes drifted to the window, where the mother leopard still waited, her amber gaze unflinching in the last rays of a bleeding sun. Sarah glanced up from her work, eyes shining with something between awe and heartbreak. "She chose you, Marcus," she whispered. "Of all the men in Africa, she chose you to carry her last hope." The orange twilight bathed the room in surreal brilliance, shadows of two humans and a dying cub stretching like long, desperate prayers across the walls. The final stitches went in, sterile bandages wrapping the tiny shoulder, sealing hope into her battered body. Outside, the stars began to pierce the darkening sky one by one, like silent witnesses to this fragile alliance of man and beast. Sarah packed away her tools, exhaustion etched into her face. "Tonight will decide," she said softly, her voice the hush of wind over endless plains. "If she survives till dawn, she might just have a chance." And as darkness fell over the African wilderness, Marcus realized he was no longer just a visitor here. He was part of a story older than time, bound by a promise written in the eyes of a mother who dared to trust a man. Between the hunter and the hunted lies a place where miracles are born. The night was a living thing outside Marcus's hut, the darkness pulsing with the distant roars of lions and the mournful whoops of hyenas drifting across the endless plains. Inside, a single flickering oil lamp held back the black tide, casting a warm, trembling glow over the tiny leopard. Cub curled in a makeshift nest of blankets. Marcus sat beside her, exhausted beyond measure, yet wide awake. Each shallow, rattling breath of the cub became the center of his universe. The tiny amber eyes sometimes flickered open, unfocused, seeing a world of wood walls and strange smells so far removed from the wild it was born into. Outside the thin wooden door, the mother leopard's eyes glowed in the lamplight like two molten coins, unwavering, unblinking, a guardian spirit refusing to leave. Every hour of that endless night stretched like a century. Marcus's hand never left the cub's trembling side, feeling the fragile warmth of life pulsing under thin fur. Each time her breath hitched, panic stabbed him. Every weak mule sent a shock of terror through his bones. But as dawn bled across the sky, the first pale light touching the savannah's sea of grass, something changed. The cub's eyes opened wider, clearer, following Marcus's fingers as he brushed her tiny head. Her breathing was steadier, stronger, life's fierce ember glowing brighter. Outside, the mother leopard rose, muscles rippling under her golden, dew-slicked fur, head high and ears pricked, a queen awakening with the new day. Marcus stepped out into the orange dawn, careful not to disturb the cub's newfound slumber. Human and leopard met eyes across a short, eternal distance, both ragged from the night's silent battle. "She's still alive," Marcus croaked, voice rough with sleeplessness and the raw edge of emotion. "And I think she's going to make it." For a heartbeat, the mother leopard was a statue of gold and black. Then she blinked once, slowly, deliberately, the universal gesture of trust, a silent thank you shimmering in her gaze. The air between them felt sacred. In the longest nights of despair, a single heartbeat of hope can bind worlds together. Time became a blur as 3 days slipped past in a fever dream of bandage changes, trembling hands delivering drops of honeyed water, and anxious nights spent under the fragile light of the oil lamp. Each sunrise felt like a personal victory. Each sunset a reminder of the fragile line they walked. The mother leopard never strayed far from the porch, her presence a constant shadow dancing at the edge of lamplight. She vanished sometimes, only to return with fresh prey, small antelope, hares, the evidence of hurried hunts made between moments of vigilant watch over her cub. Inside, Marcus's world shrank to the table and the bed, everything else a distant memory. On the fourth morning, a subtle but profound change arrived. As Marcus reached to change the dressing on the cub's wound, he felt a faint resistance, a soft but fierce hiss slicing the quiet dawn. The cub's eyes, clearer than ever before, narrowed with the first glimmers of wild instinct. This wasn't the passive acceptance of a creature too weak to protest. This was a spark, the return of the fierce spirit needed to survive. Marcus's heart surged with cautious joy. The wound remained severe, swollen and raw, but hope now carried a voice, a hiss, a growl, a glint of fire in those tiny amber eyes. Sarah continued to visit daily, bringing medicine and a reassuring presence. This morning her eyes were somber as she examined the wound. "X-rays are needed," she said quietly, worry heavy in her tone. The word hung in the air like a sentence. A leopard that cannot hunt cannot live in the wild, a creature of the stars and the night sky reduced to a prisoner in a sanctuary? The thought twisted Marcus's gut with a grief so deep it felt physical. The nearest ranger clinic with X-ray equipment was a 2-hour drive over roads like red scars through the bush. And then there was the question that loomed like a storm. Cloud, the mother leopard. How does one explain to a wild queen that her cub must leave, that humans must carry her baby away? Outside, the mother rose from her place, her eyes catching the morning sun in blazing shards of amber, every ripple of muscle beneath her perfect rosette patterned coat a testament to the millions of years of evolution that had crafted her into the perfect predator. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is the surrender of trust to hands once feared. The metal transport box glinted dully in the harsh light of noon as Marcus carried it onto the porch, heart hammering in his chest. The mother leopard's head rose instantly, golden eyes locking onto the strange object. Her muscles bunched beneath her burnished fur, tension radiating off her in waves. The air seemed to thicken, charged with the unspoken words of two worlds. Marcus kept his movements slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. It wasn't words but intent, tone, the silent music of the soul that spoke across species. Each step felt like a dance on a razor's edge, a balance between desperation and hope. When the cub let out a soft, confused cry as Marcus lifted her into the transport box, the mother leopard took a single step forward, closing the distance to 3 meters. Her ears flattened, her tail lashed the dusty porch. The primal force of a mother defending her child radiated from her like heat from the sun. But she didn't attack. She watched, every line of her body coiled with the agony of helplessness, her eyes never blinking. Marcus carried the box to the vehicle, the weight of the world in his arms, each footstep heavier than the last. He placed it gently in the back seat. The mother followed, a silent, golden shadow, her eyes burning holes into his back. At the final moment she stopped, head high, tail still, eyes bright and endless. No words could promise her the cub's safety. No gesture could assure her this was the right path. Only fragile trust connected them, a shimmering invisible thread stretched to its breaking point. As the vehicle rumbled to life, Marcus looked back one last time, catching those eyes in the dust-choked morning light. They held a storm of fear, love, and something like resignation. When there are no words left, trust becomes the final bridge across the abyss. The journey to the ranger station was a harrowing symphony of jolting wheels and clouds of red dust billowing through shattered rays of sun. Each bump rattled Marcus's bones and sent fresh waves of fear crashing through his heart. He could hear the faint cries of the cub each time the vehicle lurched, each tiny whimper slicing deeper than any knife. Years of living in Africa had taught Marcus the brutal honesty of the wild, but nothing had prepared him for the unbearable responsibility of carrying another life so fragile, so sacred. At the clinic, the sterile smell of antiseptic replaced the rich, earthen scent of the savannah. White walls gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. The hum of machines filled the sterile air with cold indifference. Technicians moved with brisk efficiency, eyes hardened by years of emergencies. But the sight of a tiny leopard cub, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion, hushed even the most hardened among them. X-rays confirmed a fractured shoulder blade, a wound. That would heal but require a metal pin and months of careful recovery. The news carried the sweet sting of hope, a slim but real chance at freedom. The surgery lasted 2 agonizing hours, each second a drop of molten anxiety dripping into Marcus's chest. He paced the narrow waiting room until the door finally swung open, revealing the cub wrapped in warm towels, a tiny brace securing her leg. One night of monitoring would decide everything. As he drove home under a bruised sky streaked with purple and crimson, the empty seat beside him felt like a gaping wound. Would the mother leopard still be waiting? Could the bridge of trust survive one more night of absence? And as the first stars blinked awake over the vast African plains, Marcus wondered at the miracle that had brought a queen of shadows to his humble door. In the vast silence of the wild, a single act of faith can echo louder than 1,000 roars. Top of form long before Marcus ever stepped into the endless grasslands of the Masai Mara, the mother leopard had been watching him, a silent sentinel in the shadows, eyes sharp and ancient, reading him the way only the wild can read the soul. She had learned his patterns, the gentle way he set out water for thirsty birds, how he never raised his voice to the creatures that skittered across his porch, the patience etched into his every dawn and dusk. Maybe it was this quiet kindness she recognized, or maybe it was simply the desperate gamble of a mother with nowhere else to turn, but either way, she chose him. On the night he returned from the clinic, the vast African darkness seemed more empty than ever. The savannah had swallowed the mother leopard whole. The porch, once alive with the quiet electricity of her watchful presence, was abandoned. Marcus called softly into the night, his voice dissolving into the vast sea of stars and rustling grass. Silence answered him. No golden shape emerged from the shadows, no eyes glinted from the tree line. That night he sat by the window, oil lamp casting small islands of light across his tired face, waiting beneath the endless blanket of stars. Each hour that passed without a rustle or soft growl deepened his fear. Had she lost faith? Had she given up hope? The night was endless, but dawn finally came, its first light falling on an empty yard. His heart heavy with dread, Marcus drove back to the clinic. But there, the cub greeted him with eyes bright as polished amber, head lifting to the touch of his hand, breath steady and strong. Her first small bites of ground meat from a syringe tasted like victory. As the medical team transferred her into the transport box, their hands gentle, hope shimmered with every breath. Sometimes the courage to trust is the greatest miracle of all. The journey home unfolded beneath a pale sky brushed with drifting clouds, every mile filled with questions that gnawed at Marcus's heart. Where had the mother leopard gone? Had she scoured the savannah, calling for her child, searching until her voice broke on the winds? Or had she, in the fierce clarity that only wild creatures possess, accepted that her cub's best chance lay not in teeth and claw, but in the hands of a human? As the car rolled into the yard, the porch remained empty, still and silent as a tomb. But as Marcus laid the cub, now named Jabari, Swahili for brave, On the familiar blanket inside his hut, a deeper truth unfurled in his chest, like the sunrise itself. The mother leopard had not abandoned her cub. She had entrusted her child's life to Marcus, an act of faith more profound than any words could hold. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm, laptop open on the kitchen table beside Jabari's warm nest, conference calls punctuated by small roars as the cub discovered her voice, bandage changes turning into gentle games of tug with soft cloth. Each night, Marcus left the door ajar, not out of blind hope, but as a tribute to the wild queen who had trusted him. He knew she wouldn't come back, yet the door stood open in silent respect. The greatest bond is not forged in comfort, but in the crucible of survival. By the second week, Jabari's determination was undeniable. Her first steps were a clumsy dance, tiny paws sliding across the wooden floor as she tested the strength of healing bones. Marcus watched with bated breath, each stagger a triumph, each fall a promise of resilience. Her roar, thin and wavering but fierce, echoed through the hut the day she spotted a bird outside the window, the spark of the hunter alight in her eyes. Word of Marcus's extraordinary charge spread beyond the borders of his small clearing. Villagers, at first wary, came one by one, curiosity overcoming suspicion. They brought small gifts of meat, whispered blessings, and soon their stories changed. The man who saved a leopard cub became the tale told by firelight, woven into the fabric of local legend. Wildlife researchers followed, cameras clicking, notebooks filling with theories that fell apart in the face of what they saw. A tiny predator thriving under the care of a man, a mother leopard's impossible act of trust rewriting what they thought they knew of wild instincts. But no lens, no chart could fully capture the truth unfolding inside Marcus's hut. Some stories live beyond science, woven instead from faith and grace. As the third month dawned, Jabari had grown into a lithe, beautiful creature. Her limp remained a small reminder of the night she nearly died, but it did not slow the bright fire in her eyes or the strength in her stride. She pounced on shadows, climbed Marcus's furniture with regal disdain, and pressed her head into his hand when he came home each evening. Yet Marcus knew her world could not remain four wooden walls and a dusty porch. She was a child of the stars and tall grasses, born to stalk the shifting twilight, not nap beside a humming laptop. Sarah and James found a private reserve, a haven of forest and savanna where Jabari could live as she was meant to, wild, but protected. On the morning of parting, the air was heavy with emotion. Jabari paced the hut, amber eyes wide, tail lashing as she sensed the change. Marcus knelt beside her blanket one last time, his hand lingering behind her ears where she still leaned into his touch. Words felt useless. Their bond was beyond language, forged in blood, sleepless nights, and a mother's desperate plea. As Jabari stepped onto the porch, the air shimmered with a quiet miracle. From the tall grass at the clearing's edge, a golden black shape slipped into view, the mother leopard. She watched, silent and proud, as her child stepped into the next chapter. Only Marcus saw her. Only he heard the whisper of wind carrying the scent of the wild queen. As the reserve vehicle pulled away, Jabari's eyes met his through the dusty glass one last time, fierce and fearless. And as the red haze of departing tires settled, Marcus stood alone beneath the endless African sky, the mother leopard's presence lingering like a blessing in the air. When nature asks for help, and we answer, we become part of a story greater than ourselves.